Welcome to In Pieces with Our Land. This podcast is a conversation between me, Kim Drobes, and Atlanta-based artist Our Land. It's about how work comes into the world and what happens after it does. Each episode focuses on a single piece, not just how it was made, but how it moved through cities, through people, and through time. We talk about the small decisions, the late nights, and the moments when a piece took on a life of its own. They're stories about process, instinct, and the path art takes as it circulates through public space and private memory. This is art after it leaves the studio. Today, we're discussing Ronnie's iconic Pray for ATL piece. If you're in Atlanta, you have seen it. It's been on bridges, your neighbor's car bumper, heck, it's even inked on the skin of some locals. The simple image of those praying hands has become the unofficial seal of our city. But long before it was a sticker, it was a call to activism for a city that Ronnie feared was losing its soul. Today, we'll talk about the origin, the evolution, and the impact of Pray for ATL with the one and only Our Land. Hi, Ronnie.
Hey, Kim.
I'm excited to talk about Pray for ATL. It is one of the pieces that I most associate with you. Let's talk about how it started. Do you know what year? I'm thinking early 2000s.
It was, and I think I can trace it back to the very early aughts. I'd been in Atlanta for probably as a resident for a good decade plus by the time I put that around. I'd been coming to Atlanta since the early 80s, so I'd fallen in love with Atlanta long before I even moved here, but officially moved here in the early 90s and got really accustomed to the vibe here, and it's just one of those things where you understand Atlanta to be a certain way. And when I say Atlanta, I speak for the in-town community, which, everything is 5 to 10 minutes. I was saying this the other night, someone was talking about living in Atlanta versus other places. It's like you can live in the suburbs and everything is a commute, but if you live in the city, in the boroughs, the 7 or 8 great neighborhoods plus that our lives revolve around, everything is 5 to 10 minutes. So it's really easy. And so that is what I knew to be Atlanta, not the get out on 75 and go to
Right.
McDonough or Alpharetta. Not that there's anything wrong with those places because there's probably a great quality of life there. But what I knew about in town Atlanta was that it had a vibrance, a nice concentration of friendly, enthusiastic, creative people who were here all for similar reasons, which was just sort of this cultural refugee center that we all know and love, where we've come from the region or from beyond. I mean, people come here from everywhere, but specifically the region was what I understood. I came from Jacksonville, so I was in love with the place from the minute I got here and knew the possibilities were just endless. You come here and you make your thing happen in places that you come from you can't. So I'd been here a good solid 10 years plus, probably 12 or 13 years. And I started noticing a change, almost like the secret was out and developers and urban designers were starting to figure out like, oh, this is where a lot of people are and we need to capitalize on this. So let's build. And I think
Right.
the main impetus for this, and I don't necessarily despise this development, but at the time the proposal sounded horrible, and that was the Caroline Street development.
Let's just pause there for 1 second because back in the day when that development was on the table, it was the first giant development that we all felt like was coming into our part of town, and those type of things were only in the suburbs before. It blew our minds,
Yeah.
and now when you look around in town, it's like one of the oldest ones, but it's certainly not the only one.
It just felt like such a threat to a certain way
Yeah.
of life that we all were very accustomed to, which was, kind of homespun, grassroots, they're just like bars, restaurants, and this whole culture that we had and held, that was ours, and then you started seeing proposals for this development, which at one point was, Atlanta Gaslight, I believe.
Mhm.
And they had that property for a long time. It was just like a spot that was kind of, forlorn, and we knew it wouldn't last forever, and then all of these chains. I mean, to be fair, I guess that we need a certain amount of that just for the convenience. I mean, I could live without it. Jonathan Ray, who he and his wife took over the Plaza Theater before Chris Escobar eventually had it and turned it into what it is now, but they kinda held on to it and kept it alive. Johnny and I were really upset about this whole Caroline Street thing because we thought this
Mhm.
is the end of an amazing era for Atlanta because we're just gonna have convenience and chain retail in our faces, and that's gonna take over everything. It didn't quite work out like that, but our get-togethers and talks about it, we would just get together and drink beer and just vent about it and what are we gonna do? And we did have an event at Joe's Coffee back in like 2004, I think it was, where we had like a call for entries of just people who wanted to also express themselves and let's do an art show and
Mhm.
a music event. And it was pretty cool. And I remember there were people that had thoughts and feelings about this encroaching situation. But the overall is that, even before Pray for ATL, let's go back to 2000, 2001. I was already worried about the state of affairs in the city and the threat to the charm and the vibe that we had sort of gotten to a place where like, God, this is the best place on earth. I mean, it even
Mm.
sort of made me think instead of moving to New York, I'll stay in Atlanta because the vibe is just so cool
Yeah.
here. And there's just a litany of things that you can say were just the things we were already starting to identify as our own. And this now is the new center of the universe for those of us who love this place. Um, but in 2001, I started putting up those yuppie ghetto signs that were just like these plastic or core plast is what they call it, signs that mimicked other signs that were happening around the same time, touting these new places you can live that were affordable, that were lofts, condos, and the like. I put those up, in mass for years. I mean, know what else to do. It's like, oh my God, we have these historic homes everywhere. Now every available space is being developed, just tiny little plots of land to put up 50.
Everything was becoming like a live, work, play development.
Yeah, yeah, and so there was that, but then it's almost like in tandem with that, we have these new strip centers and outdoor malls that were coming up, like the Caroline Street. It's like you have 100 new homes here and 100 new homes there. There are these prefab kinda places that will absolutely not last for
Mhm.
40 or 50 years. They will fall apart. We called them yuppie ghettos, or I did. So the Pray for ATL was the follow-up because it was me just throwing my hands up and being like, "Oh my god, well, just let's pray for this place," that was kind of the thought behind it, but, I think my original plan was just to sort of communicate that or express myself in a way where I was just like, "It's just all up to God now." So I started putting these Pray for ATL signs up around, and then the large anchor piece was on the, Moreland Tunnel, the DeKalb overpass. So every so often, I can't remember what year I started doing that, but I put one up there and it lasted for a while and then eventually it wore off. So I sort of figured out how to keep it sustainable. And then I think I put one up in like 2003 or 4 and it lasted for years. The best
Mhm.
part of that is that during the development of the Caroline Street thing, which I think was fully developed and functional by 2006, um, I had that piece that I thought was just, like, right in the face of that, like, when you leave this new
Yeah.
development, it's like, "Okay, well, you've gotta go buy Pray for ATL, so you are contributing to the reason why we have to pray for our city." I mean, clearly, Jonathan being one of those people that I confided in and we talked together about this, and he had the same emotions I did about it. Most people probably didn't feel like it was any big deal because, everybody grows up in a place where they have these conveniences, and Atlanta wasn't as convenient. You couldn't go to, a Lowe's or a Target or a lot of these other businesses back then, you had to go into the suburbs to
Right.
access that kind of convenience. So I don't think the general way of being for most people is hell no to this. It's like there's a certain fragment of the population that is opposed to it no matter what, and I was one of those. But I remember friends of mine that I was relatively close to, like, "What's the big deal? Why do you care? It's like it's so convenient." And I'm like, "Oh my god, you're missing the whole point."
Mm,
But fast forward to the Pray for ATL on the Moreland overpass just stuck around for a long time. And as time passed, people got used to the Caroline Street thing and the other developments that were similar. But the Pray for ATL just persisted in a way where it was no longer necessarily about that or anything in particular that needed prayer, and it became more of just an identifier for the city. And that was not under my control at all. It's like, you put something out into the world and the expression is no longer just what you intend it to be. It becomes something that's more how people interpret it.
right.
So
Did people come up to you and think that it was somehow affiliated with religion?
Yeah, I think people did to some degree, but the best part was because sort of like the lost cat thing, it first and foremost wasn't something associated with me and was just kind of anonymous. I didn't really claim it. I just put RL Ministries on there. If I had to do it all over, may not do the same thing, but I did then. I didn't put my name on it. I just wanted to sort of be this thing that was anonymous. And so there was a lot of things that happened where I'd run into people and, a year or 2 or 3 would go by and they'd be like, "I just realized that thing that's out there on Moreland Avenue is yours." And it's kind of just a play on, traditional praying hands. And the only thing that's mine about it is just like the intention, and the pray for ATL part is, you know, kind of one of those things that's like intentionally my expression, and then it's my style, so to
Mhm.
speak. Like it's my version of something that's a time honored praying hand.
When do you think it became widely known that it was your piece?
Oh, I don't know. That's a good question. I think the people that did know it was mine that were already onto it a little bit early, much to my surprise, because to me, it was just a minor expression, but one that was super true to my sensibility and certainly my loyalty to a place that had given me a brand new life, in the early 90s and given me like it was my new home. So I was expressing myself about what I was worried with in terms of how the city might be changing. So people that were in on what might have been sort of a joke about it back then, because I wasn't super serious, but I was serious in my emotion, but it's kind of like a flippant, like, let's just pray for this place, man. And the other thing was like, not only was I wheat pasting it, I was simultaneously doing silk screens and of the praying hands on wood and putting them up in bars and restaurants and things, people that would allow me to hang them, sort of also like the lost cat thing. It's like a whole MO that I had going with that stuff. People would say that pray for ATL thing, that is really something,
Mhm.
so people that were in on it early before it was widely known that it was mine were like, that is important, like they found something in it that was like maybe a little more transcendent than just what the original intention was. Um, and then as time went on, and I started silk screening them, the demand became pretty high for that. And then in support of those prints was this piece that just sat there on Moreland forever, long before there was any graffiti on that tunnel. Now that tunnel is full of graffiti, but back
Right.
in the old days, it was the only mark on that tunnel. For whatever reason, Krog Tunnel also had one, but it was known to be a graffiti-laden underpass. But, in the Moreland, overpass was not known for graffiti, and only that wheat paste in the middle of the divider was the thing. And then throughout time, people started to do their marks and stuff on the tunnel, and I would be on my way out of town. I'd pass through the tunnel, and I would see city workers, and this was like 20 some odd years ago. I would see city workers painting over the graffiti that had started, and I was like, well, they're going to paint over the praying hands too, of course. And then when I'd get back, the praying hands was
It
all that remained.
didn't.
Like they
Mm,
were not afraid, but they just didn't touch it. They
yeah,
painted over everything but that. And that was really,
that's pretty amazing.
yeah, it was interesting that it happened. Like these dudes were gonna leave that up. So it was this thing where for 1 minute, it was like about a reaction to a new type of a development that we had never seen before in Atlanta.
Right.
And then the next minute, it's like this thing that takes on all these different meanings. And one of your questions was about people thinking about its religion. I left Jacksonville in the, early '90s, because I mean, I love the city of Jacksonville, but it's problematic. But it's a very steeped in Baptist church culture and a religious city, and, churches on every corner, it feels like. And so I moved to Atlanta, and I've got all these new friends that are atheist, agnostic, and different strains of philosophical and ideological. It was such a range, and it was so refreshing. So all of a sudden, I have this praying hand thing that's sort of blowing up, and, like, I'm getting emails and contacts from people who are Christians or religious, but are maybe disassociating themselves from the institutions. It's almost like it was a connecting point. So all of a sudden, I have all these friends that still buy into the messaging of a lot of this stuff. And the image itself of praying hands doesn't make me think that I'm going to make all these new friends that are deep in their existential, just whatever. But so that was kind of cool because I mean, a lot of those friendships that I made back then are still friendships that I have now with people who I have at least something in common with in terms of being raised in a evangelical-ish kind of environment. But then there's the opposite where people who have no proclivity or attachment to anything religious just say, "Hey, that's great. That whole praying hands thing is amazing." And it's just shocking when people tell you that something that is so simple to me and just an offshoot of my general mainstream kind of messaging will find something so compelling. Then flash forward to like maybe 2000, I don't know, 2010 or so. I remember talking to a guy in Savannah, and that the mark had been around for a good 5 or 6 years at that point, and he's like a dude who's like pretty involved in the Savannah culture, and he's an entrepreneur and all this. But he said, that Pray for ATL thing you've got going on in Atlanta is like the I Heart New York of the South." And I
Mhm.
was like, wow, I've never even thought about it like that. But it sort of did become that, where it's no longer at all what it was intended to be. It's just like a basic rep Atlanta kind of thing, which I mean, of course, I'm so proud of that. And I've had versions of the thing now that don't even have the pray for part. It's just the hands and then
Mhm.
ATL. And I like that just as much, but I guess it needed for a minute to be spelled out. I don't know.
When you're talking about, someone comparing it to I Love New York, it made me wonder, has any other city ever co-opted it?
I don't know, independent of my own efforts, if it has, but I remember around 2008 or 9 when I was doing a lot of Pray for ATL stuff, people would ask me, like, people in New Orleans right after Katrina, people said,
Yeah.
"Would you do Pray for NOLA?" So I did, like, a run of white, black, and gold, sort of true to Mardi Gras slash the New Orleans Saints kind of color scheme, and did a Pray for NOLA. None of this diminishes the original intent was just specifically about my city, but people asked, and then I did like versions of that for NOLA. I did one for a church in LA called I think it's called the Reality Church of Los Angeles or Los Angeles Reality Church. I can't remember which.
I think it was probably inevitable
Yeah.
that it would show up in other cities, and I'm happy to hear that you were the person who was actually behind it because I think of Austin specifically
Yeah. Yeah.
and Keep Austin Weird,
Yeah.
and how so many other cities just took that and ran with it, and it to
Yeah.
me, it stopped being associated with just Austin.
Yeah. And the thing for me with other cities being involved and me doing like a pray for X, Y, and Z is just that really it was just intended for Atlanta and it's perfect for the region and how it shaked out. But I almost felt like I was cheating on Atlanta by just offering up something that was so specifically Atlanta. I mean,
Yeah.
I didn't do it for very long. And then I did that for Chicago. I think it was just CHGO. Um People still send me pictures when they go to, like, the Empty Bottle and other institutions in Chicago that still have one hanging after all these years. But specifically, it's been more about Atlanta for sure, and that's what I only really wanted it to be.
Aside from other cities, the graphic became somewhat different. At, at least I remember cat hands.
And so that's like, like the last time we talked about Lost Cat, it's like when something becomes so popular, for lack of a better way to put it, and me being someone who is steeped in making fun of things that are popular or that are mainstream, when you feel like your own stuff becomes like, and you're like, man, it's not that you're against it because you're proud that it has that kind of resonance, but you still can't help yourself and either homage it or make fun of it, which is it's both.
Right.
So, I remember when Catlanta, who's a really nice guy, I like him a lot, and his work is pretty all over the place here in town too. I remember he posted a large "Pray for ATL," but put "Pray for" I think he just put it as Catlanta. I want to answer back and say, "Oh, hell no, we're praying for CATL." So it's like I just like one-upped him in a fun way,
Mm,
um, which wasn't all about him, but it's because he's Atlanta and he's cats also, and very much specifically cats.
right.
So that was just kinda my answer back. So I just made cat paws out of it, so I started putting those around a little bit, and at the sort of the same time, I put up, a version of Pray for ATL that was just Atlantis. So I tried to break Atlantis down to the essentials. I can't remember what it was, like ATL TIS or something like that. And there were webbed hands and there were the praying hands, but they had fins, and it was just like it was so stupid, but it was fun.
Oh, that's wonderful. I never saw that.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't like I did a ton of them. Just having fun with the mark, and the cat one was and still is kind of a fun thing to do that still lives on.
That's fantastic. Can we talk about the collaboration you did during the pandemic?
Oh, yeah, God, I forgot all about that. So, that was one of those things where early on into the shutdown,
Like March 2020.
yeah, March 2020, Allison, my wife, was working with me on a bunch of projects, and I just sent her the basic drawing and said, "Hey, can you just shore this up for me so it's digitally acceptable?" And, it just had on it a wash for ATL. So instead of it just being praying hands, it became the praying hands with suds,
Right.
bubbles and suds, and it said wash for ATL. And then I posted it on social media just as sort of a PSA. I didn't have any intentions for it. I didn't think it was going to be any big deal. I posted it and got a pretty cool reaction immediately. This is one of those things where sometimes social media is a great test market ground for anything. Not always, but it can be. And, like, within 24 hours, I had so many people contacting me that were from different organizations. They were like, "Hey, can we talk about this?" And the one that we landed on was, the United Way, which had a program already sort of in the works, that was kind of a COVID response for people that, may have issues in terms of income and the like, just, surviving through this thing. And so we had a conversation. I talked to the, CEO, a couple people at United Way, and we decided to co-brand together, and that made sense to me. So we launched what was a PSA on social media that was just personal. It became a thing that was a co-brand between me and the United Way, which raised tons of money.
So cool.
I don't even know how to go into, like, how much of a gift that kept being in terms of doing well by doing good kind of thing throughout probably the next 6 months or more, and sort of was one of those, images that was associated with a terrible moment in our history, but also kind of a hopeful moment that it represented a lot of things. So I loved that. And, just being another one of those homage parodies, so to speak, of the original Pray for ATL was really lovely. I really still very proud of that, that it just something so simple could have such reach and resonance.
It was very meaningful. I actually, bought myself a couple coffee mugs from the United Way.
Oh, wow.
Still,
That's
we
awesome.
use them all the time, and it makes me happy to look at.
It's just alive and keeps on going. It's surprising that it's just transformed into this thing that's completely not what I intended it to be. And that's just speaks to how your personal expressions that you put into the world can be one thing, but how they wind up is a complete other. It has a life of its own. And like I said, had no idea that it would be something that would live this long, and it doesn't show any sign of slowing down, so I'm proud of that. But that's one of those things that's outside of ego for sure. It just is like an off expression that's not in the main line of what you intentionally put out. It's almost like it's lightning in a bottle, or just something that, comes from the heavens, which sounds so corny, but I don't know why I ever thought to do that, but I did it, and now I live with it every day. And so like the lost cat thing, it's had like a really long life. It's been in tons of movies, TV shows, videos, and commercials. It shows up in the background, lots of stuff. So I love that because ultimately it represents the city that I love and that I've dedicated my life to. So that maybe in particular I'm proud of. And other cities that have had similar peril, like in terms of like overdevelopment, commercial development, Atlanta has still held its own in ways that I don't think other cities with similar, like, I don't think Nashville is anything like what it used to be, and I don't mean to bag on Nashville because there are parts of it I really love, but it has not been able to hold on to its soul like Atlanta still seems to have a pretty good hold on the basic. I mean, don't wouldn't you agree? Like, Atlanta still has something that hasn't
Yeah.
completely left.
Yeah. It's a special city, and, speaking of Atlanta, for our listeners that are not local to Atlanta, I know we had tons of references in this episode that you might not have kept up with, but if you have any questions, shoot us an email. We are so happy to tell stories about any place that you heard mentioned that you wanna know a little more about. And with that, we'll wrap up this episode. But in the next episodes to come, we'll keep returning to individual works from our land's catalog. Some well known, others a little bit quieter, maybe forgotten, and we're going to take the time to sit with them, not to explain them away, but to trace the paths that they took and the meanings they picked up along the way. Thank you so much for your time today.
You're welcome, Kim. Being from North Florida, where I mean, that's clearly where I grew up and where I came from, but Atlanta is the place that adopted me, and that's where I've thrived, and to this day, it's still the center of the universe for me. So that's what makes that thing special is that, in some way, I guess prayers were answered. Like the big genie in the sky said, "You're welcome."
Special thanks to DJ, composer, and producer Chris DeVoe. He provides the theme music for this podcast. If you'd like to learn more about him, you can at his website, which is chrisdevoe.co. There's also a link to his website in our show notes. If you're enjoying In Pieces with Our Land, please consider leaving us a rating or review. It really helps others discover the work. And if you'd like to support the podcast production with a small donation, we would be truly grateful. You can learn more at inpieceswithourland.com.